And here we go with part 2, and this part, having seen the pedigrees, here's one of the world's most famous pedigrees that ties into history in an amazing way. And you can see here the 4 images in front of you here: Washington crossing the Delaware, Vladimir Putin, Adolf Hitler, and Queen Elizabeth and her husband, now deceased, Prince Philip. Initially, these 4 things might not seem to be terribly well connected, especially to genetics and pedigrees, but there is one family pedigree that does relate all of these together. So let's go take a look at how this all plays out. And we're going to start out with the current Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II. And here, of course, as I mentioned, her recently deceased husband, Prince Philip, and where they fit in on this. So we have a large pedigree here showing 7 generations. There are now actually 8 generations since this was published. And you'll notice in this that there is a mention of something called hemophilia. And hemophilia is a bleeding disorder where your blood does not clot properly. Long story short, there's a about a 12-step process that allows your blood to clot normally. And in folks with hemophilia, one of those steps does not happen. A mutation causes a protein not to form, and thus you don't form blood clots. And so even small wounds, like say a paper cut, would continue to bleed until that wound actually grows closed, which for a paper cut might take several hours. So for bigger wounds, that's a big deal, and that can result in death. And indeed, without the most modern of medical care, it is rare for people to survive with hemophilia much past their 10th birthday or so. Just all of the things that cause us to bleed as young children may be enough to actually kill folks with hemophilia. So that being said, you can see all the people on this pedigree who are affected with it. Notice all the filled in squares. Those are all the males with hemophilia. You will also notice that, with I think only one exception, and that being, and let me pull up my laser pointer here so we can actually see it. There we go. I think the exception here of Leopold here, no other male survived to adulthood and thus had children. So that is a rarity. Then you'll notice there are a number of females, starting with Queen Victoria, who are half circles, halfway filled in. And that means that they were heterozygous for this, but they don't show the trait, so they are considered normal. So the only folks here in this pedigree who are affected are the squares that are fully, completely filled in. That being said, and we'll come back to hemophilia later, this is a very famous pedigree because it's got multiple royal houses. If you look at the bold face, we have the British royal house, which is of some interest initially, the German royal house here on the left, the Prussian royal house, which was kind of a part of Germany. What many of you may not know is really that before the early part of the 20th century, what we think of now as Germany was actually a series of Central European kingdoms, one of which was Prussia. Then we have the Russian royal house here in the middle, and then the Spanish royal house. So you see there's a lot of connection across the royal families of Europe. And there are some names here that will jump out to you quite significantly. And so let's go take a look at them. The first one I mentioned was Queen Elizabeth and her husband, Prince Philip. Down here, the current Queen of England. And then her family, as it exists now, she had 4 children, you can see. Of particular interest is Prince Charles, the next in line to the throne. He married Princess Diana, who herself died in a car accident in the 1990s. But They had two sons, William and Henry. They both have since married and have their own children, which aren't shown on here. So the throne will pass from Prince Charles to his eldest son, Prince William, and then from Prince William to his oldest child, who is Prince George. Okay, so that's the setup there. And the history of things is absolutely fascinating. So let's take a look at things, and just to give you a little bit more detail, here's another version of the British royal family pedigree. It's a little bit more confusing because it's been scrunched up, but here you can see Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip there, then Queen Elizabeth's 4 children, and then their extended families down here that we won't go into. But Prince Charles married Princess Diana, their 2 children, William and Harry. Prince William married Princess Catherine, and then they now have 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Prince William's brother Harry, who's been in the news, married Meghan Markle, the American actress, and they several years ago had their son Archie. Of interest here, just Prince Charles and Diana were divorced, and then Prince Charles later on married Camilla. They have had no children, so there are no offspring from that relationship. So that gives you kind of a hint of how things go there. And now to one of the most famous paintings in American history, which may not seem to have anything to do with this, but hold on a quick moment. So this is a painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. It was actually painted in 1851 by the German-American Emanuel Lutze, and it's very famous, and it tells the part of the story of on Christmas Eve, Washington and the American troops crossed the Delaware River near Trenton, New Jersey, to attack British forces by surprise, and thus helped to turn the tide of the American Revolution. And this surprise attack on Christmas Eve was very successful because, as the legend goes, the troops that they attacked, first of all, they weren't British at all. They belonged to what is now Germany. They were called Hessian troops from a region called Hesse. And they were enjoying themselves with lots of drinks on Christmas Eve, taking it easy, weren't expecting to be attacked, and Washington's troops, all crossing the ice-choked Delaware, were able to make a nearly silent crossing and then capture a very large Hessian force with minimal damage to the American forces. So big turning point in American history. And how does that relate to this particular pedigree? Well, as you know from American history, George III was king during our American Revolution, and he hired over 30,000 Hessian troops to come and fight on behalf of England, which was not an uncommon thing to be done. And the Hessians were known as some of the most highly trained soldiers in the world at that time. And George went to them because, lo and behold, he had connections with Louis II, the Grand Duke of Hesse, who you'll notice then this branch of German royalty winds up tying into the British royalty with a marriage to Queen Victoria's youngest daughter, as well as married to her daughter Alice here. So we have those connections to a part of the German royal family. Then as we come along later on, we'll see that Queen Victoria's oldest daughter, who was not eligible to become the Queen of England herself, because at the time the law said it was the eldest male child was the heir to the throne. So if the eldest child was female, she would marry off to ideally another royal family. And that is what was done. She married King Frederick III of Germany, and that was the waning days of the German royalty, and they pretty much stopped being a thing by World War I, by the 19 teens. So that gives you a little layout of things there. There's also some great intrigue in the world of the British royal family, and if you look here, you see Adolf Hitler jumps out at you. You may not recognize most of the other folks. You may know down here on the bottom left here is Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II. So again, how does this all relate, and who are these other folks? Well, if you look here at the top center picture, okay, this is a man who goes by two names, okay. He originally was King Edward VIII. Here he is, shown as the Duke of Windsor in this, and you'll notice he doesn't have the title king, even though he is the firstborn son of King George V. So King George V passed away in the early 1930s. King Edward VIII takes the throne and then falls in love with this woman he's with here. Her name is Wallis Simpson. She was a twice divorced American socialite, and he was madly in love with her and faced a problem. The Church of England at the time had a rule that the king could not marry someone who had been divorced. And so he was faced with the issue of marry the woman he loves, give up the throne, which is called abdication, or keep the throne and not marry the woman he loves. As the story goes, he married the woman he loved, gave up the throne to his younger brother, who takes on the title King George VI. You see it here, and he is here in this image with Winston Churchill, and he becomes King of England during World War II. Now you see Adolf Hitler up here. How does he fit into the story? Well, as it turns out, the Duke of Windsor marries Wallis Simpson, and they apparently have some very strong sympathies toward Nazi Germany. And indeed, you see on the right-hand side, I believe it was in 1936, they go to visit Hitler at his summer home, and they become surprisingly close with him. There was talk that maybe Wallis Simpson herself may have been actually a Nazi spy. And toward the end of World War II, documents were discovered that there had been a German plan that had they taken over England, which they did not, the plan was to then reinstate King William the Eighth as the puppet king of England, who would be in cahoots with Hitler. So that was part of the plan. So, but Wallis Simpson and the Duke of Windsor wind up living out the rest of their years in various places, including the United States. Then the great story of King George VI, here with Winston Churchill. He takes the throne, but he does not want it because he has a terrible, terrible stutter. And speaking in public as a king must do, especially a wartime king, was just a huge, huge challenge for him. So he gets speech therapy and works really hard because he wants to be a king that these people can look up to and be inspired by during the war. And the fear was that a king that got up on giving radio addresses and the like would not be able to inspire people with such a stutter. And you can see the movie, The King's Speech, down in the bottom right there, is won the Academy Award for Best Picture in, I believe it was 2010, and tells the story of how King George VI overcame his disability and his stutter to be that inspirational king for the British folks, even during the worst of World War II. So that gives you a sense of that. Then in 1952, the king dies, and his daughter, Queen Elizabeth, takes over the throne, and she has been Queen of England ever since, and she is currently the longest reigning monarch, male or female, in British history. So that ties you in to the British side of things here, and there you get a sense for, King George, to then there's the Duke of Windsor, but the line of succession through King George VI, and then Queen Elizabeth, and as I've already said, down through Prince Charles. Now, another part of, I'm going the wrong direction, excuse me. Okay. This brings us up to a little bit more, shall we say, modern history. And Vladimir Putin here you all recognize. Is it possible that without this disease of hemophilia, he does not become president of Russia? Maybe there is no Soviet Union. The history of it all is very different, and that is, I'm not going to go into great detail on that, but that is going to tie in to the nature of another branch of the family. Queen Victoria's daughter Alice marries a German prince, a Hessian prince, and they have, as you can see here, a big family. And you'll notice that one of their daughters is Alexandra, and she marries the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II. Tsar in Russian terminology is like king. Okay, and you'll see it spelled two ways, by the way. There's CZAR, as you see it on screen here. You will also see it as TZAR or TSAR. Same thing, just different alphabet spellings there. So you'll notice that this couple has 4 daughters. And remember, royalty at that time, it was all about having a son to be your heir. Finally, they do have a son, Alexei. And Alexei, as it turns out, has this bleeding disease, hemophilia. And you'll see that in part helps lead to the downfall of Tsar Nicholas and Tsarina Alexandra. And you're going to, after you answer some questions, you'll have your next assignment will be to see that video that tells the full story. And that video will seem to be much more of a history story. It has really almost no science in it, but it's important for you to understand the impact of this particular disease. So that's where we are at there. Okay, and we will follow up then down the road later.